Well, good morning and welcome to this first reflection in our Lent series, which this year is based around Tom Wright's book, God and the Pandemic. As a church, we're encouraging everyone to read the book if possible and to engage in some discussion around the themes raised, either in one of our small groups or after a short reflection on the chapter that we're on goes out on a Sunday morning. The book was compiled following a favourable response to an article written by Wright for the Times magazine last March, as COVID-19 caused chaos around the world. Wright is clear from the outset that Christianity offers no easy answers to the question, why is this pandemic happening? Instead, it sits alongside all the other why questions that emerge in the face of suffering. Wright gives a brief overview of some explanations that have been given historically for events such as we are seeing, and he suggests that there will be modern equivalents, but he doesn't give weight to any of them. And I think it's true to say we can end up tying ourselves up in knots, searching for a reason or something or someone to blame. And even if we do come up with an answer that we find satisfactory to some degree, it will never speak to everyone's experience or perception. And it will still leave us with another question, and that is, how are we going to respond? Or as Wright puts it, what can we do? And this is what I want us to focus on this morning as we start this new series for Lent. It's a question that we will no doubt revisit throughout this study, but in this introduction to the topic, I'd like us to consider how answering this question, what can we do, can help us to live out our faith as disciples of Jesus Christ, both now in the midst of this pandemic and at other times of crisis too. There are three reasons I think asking the what question is important for our journey of faith during challenging times, and I just want to share those with you now. This first chapter that we're looking at today is entitled, Where Do We Start? And as Maria in The Sound of Music famously puts it, let's start at the very beginning. And the first reason I think the what question is helpful is because it is in essence what God did. He knew right at the start of time that humankind would turn away from him, but he didn't just keep asking why. He could have questioned, why, when I'd given them such a beautiful world, would they mess it up so badly? Or why, when I gave them everything, are they so reluctant to give me their hearts and fully trust me? But instead, he had a plan as to what he was going to do. In his love and compassion for us, he would send Jesus, his one and only Son, to offer redemption for the world. He acted. He made a way for change and reconciliation to take place. And when we use this question as a catalyst for action, some good can also come out of our negative situations, and it can stop us wallowing in our own self-pity. Now, I'm not saying we all have to put on a smiley, happy face and get busy doing things all the time. Those of you who know me will be aware that I am a great advocate that it's okay not to be okay, and that there are times when we do have to withdraw, as we don't have it within us to respond or act in a major way. But actually that in itself is an action. Question, what can I do? Answer, stop for a bit, take time to recharge, and this is a healthy thing to do. But as with all seasons, the answer to the question, what can I do, will change at different points. And if we take a minute to look at the Renew Wellbeing charity and how it was set up, we see this modelled in a really helpful way. Ruth, the director of the charity, is very honest in sharing how the first chapter of the Renew story began in a time of crisis and breakdown. And at first she did just simply have to withdraw and stop and rest. But gradually over time she discovered prayer patterns and things that were helpful in enabling her to re-engage with the world. And as she began to share her learning and in wanting to help others who found themselves in a similar position, she asked the question, what can I do? And this resulted in her setting up the first Renew Wellbeing Cafe 5 and a bit years ago. And that action then has led to even greater action and influence during this pandemic. As she's continued to ask the question, what can we do? How can we respond? Over 100 churches have now come on board, wanting to help answer the call to support their communities in the wake of the mental health tsunami we are facing. And this is the second reason this what question is so important, because when we move from the why to the what, we move from thinking solely about ourselves to thinking about others, which is what we are called to do as people of the kingdom. And this is fundamentally what Jesus does on the cross. He had no fault of his own. He had nothing to gain, and yet he suffered incredibly for the benefit of you and me. He didn't do it for himself. He did it for us. And when we ask the what question, what should we do? We begin to find a purpose which can help us to keep going, preventing us from becoming stagnant and stuck in our faith. Especially when we ask this question and seek God's input. After all, we're not trying to be lone heroes, but rather part of God's mission team. So a good place to start is by looking for signs of what God is doing in the midst of suffering and pain, or turning to his word, to passages like Jesus' manifesto as found in Luke 4, to feed the hungry, help the sick, visit the prisoner, set the captive free. There we find we are to do all we can to ease the suffering of others. And it seems there are very practical ways we can do these things at the moment. By supporting initiatives like Food Bank and Fair Share, or helping those providing lunches for children who usually have free school meals. Helping the sick at the moment can be as simple as us staying at home, doing our bit to protect the NHS, so that those who need it get the care they require. We may all feel like prisoners in our own homes at this time, and we may not be able to visit people in person, but we can have a cuppa online with someone. We can call them or write to them and stay connected to help ease some of the loneliness and isolation people are feeling. And setting people free at the moment seems to require our sacrificing the things we love, like spending time with family and friends, eating out, holidays. But in doing so, we play our part in bringing the R level down, which will help us all to come out of lockdown. None of this is new or rocket science. In fact, it seems second nature to most people in any crisis to help others in whatever way they can. And we have seen some fantastic demonstrations as COVID has wreaked havoc around the globe. But as this pandemic rolls on and on, it is good just to check in on ourselves from time to time and consider, how do we keep doing all we can when we are worn out and weary, when we're finding it hard enough to get ourselves through the days and weeks and months and have little energy or inclination to do more than that? Well, Jesus' ministry reveals a lot that can be helpful for us at these points. We see he sets aside time with God, continually going back to the Father to draw strength from him and to ensure it is the Father's will he does. And of course, there's no greater example of this than his prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane, which we'll be reading again in a few weeks' time. But as we spend time with God, we too will receive his strength and power in place of our emptiness. And we find we don't have to answer the question, what can we do alone? We can respond in the ways best suited to us with the gifts and provision he has given us. There have been some really great resources released this Lent, and one that I've been reading in a group with some other ministers is called Work from Rest, produced by LICC. And over the last few days, there have been some really helpful thoughts, including the suggestion that we should take time to stop and ask, Lord, what would you have me know in this moment? And it goes on to say God's answer might come to us in the form of wisdom for our situation, his peace, insight into the true issues at hand, or an awareness of his great love for us. But this got me thinking it could also be a prompting from the Holy Spirit to ring someone, or a sense of a vision as to something you could do that could really make a difference to someone. That way, we're not running ourselves ragged, trying to do everything, but seeking to be used God in the ways he sees best. And as we experience positive responses from our actions, I think that encouragement is often enough to give us the will and desire to want to keep going and do more. Maybe our prayer should simply be, Lord, show me what it looks like to be your disciple this day. And this leads us to the third reason we should move from asking the why question to the what question. Because in doing so, it opens up opportunities for wow moments, as we see God doing incredible things in and through his people. Moments when what can seem like just a small act of kindness on our behalf makes someone else go wow because they really needed that boost that day, or because they unexpectedly had a few days not having to worry about having enough food, or when you're part of God's solution to what seemed like an impossible situation for someone else. And these moments not only make others go wow, they make us go wow too, as we get to experience the joy of God using us to help other people and give them a glimpse of his kingdom. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be digging deeper into some Old and New Testament scriptures to help us to continue to reflect and think through the meaning of faith in a time of crisis, as we read through the rest of Wright's book. But as we begin this journey in Lent, why don't we take some time this week seeking God and asking him the question, what can we do? Listening to his heart, seeking his will and asking for his wisdom as we spend time in his word and with him in prayer. Let's ask him to use us to give hope to those who need it the most as we move from why to what to wow. Amen.